There we go. Hey there. I was wondering if it was pushing me or not. Is my sound on? Hello. Good to see you guys. Aoife, Rose, Dad, 2. Awesome. Excellent. Just this mic right before I hit, and then I didn't check any of the settings on it before I started. So, wasn't sure. Hey, Insomniacs in here. Awesome. Everybody rolling in. How are you all? I'll put the books over here. I was going to say once people started filtering in, but I'll go ahead and do it now. I got mail. It's an envelope. It's from Lady Aoife, because it says so on the return address. That's the only reason I said it out loud. So we're going to open it. I'm going to open it and see what it is, because I haven't... Awake only for the story, you need to know. Alright, we'll get to it. I'll get to it as quick as I can. I'm going to open this envelope first, though. I have no idea if this is fragile. It feels... At first I thought it was like another card, but it felt kind of thick, and so I was unsure. I don't want to... Oh. It is in cardboard. What is this? Oh. What? Ah! Hold on. Let me see what's going on. Okay. Okay, that's cute. Okay, cool. Lady Aoife sent me a stack of postcards with like little markers, and you can color them yourself. It's like a little postcard set, but you color them yourself. That's so neat. That is so neat. I love it. Dinky loves to color too, so that's really going to be exciting for them. I love it. Thank you so much. I was like, because I got like a cardboard thing and you could like squish it, but it was like rigid. So I was like, what is happening? What is in this package? I also went to the post office in cosplay again. So they were like, nothing like being side-eyed in the post office. Thank you, Lady Aoife. I can't wait to show them that later. Dinky's out right now, so like... And I'm pretty sure Sarah's doing something... No, Sarah's chilling, I think. He's in the next room. I don't want to bother him, though. Because he thinks I'm on live, and if I come busting up in there, he's going to get worried. Yeah, so... Post office lady was like... giving me the side eye again. So, always fun. I try and go on the days when I'm not in cosplay, but those days I'm normally working. So then I look like trash. I don't put that much effort into it. So then like I either look homeless or like Toshi, and I'm not sure which one's worse at this point. Because Toshi kind of looks homeless. Not... I judge myself more harshly than I think anybody else does, so it doesn't really bother me anyway. But No, the day that I do that, I'm unsure what would happen. I already ended up going to a gas station one time in Johannes and really freaked out the dude in the gas station. That was fun. Is it, or just, look, do people actually like it? Because in reality, I feel like people don't. I had a kid answer the door the other day and jump back physically. Like he had seen a fucking monster. So, depending on, I guess, what you're like as a person, but the general reaction I get is not great. It's not great. People that I see on the daily are like used to it, but then every once in a while, some kid answers the door and goes, so, not awesome. Scared of it or weak. Well, he was a child, so if he wasn't, I would be surprised. Like a child, like a 6. Why do I scare children on the regular? Then again, I scared a group of women trying to be nice because my coworker said something to me and it kind of rubbed me the wrong way. And they were like, well, I think I just make better money than you because I'm nice. And I was like, what the fuck? I can be nice. And she was like, can you? And I was like, I haven't tried, but I'm sure I could. Can't be that hard. So I went up to a door and they were like blasting Doja Cat. Like they were having some kind of party in there. You could feel Doja Cat in the walls of this apartment building. And I knock and I'm like, they're never going to hear this. And they did hear it miraculously. One of the women was like, was that the door? And then like they stopped the music and they answered the door. And I was like, well, you didn't have to stop the music on my account. And she just stared at me and I was like, did you all order pizza? And she was like, yeah. And I was like, okay, well, here you go. And she was like, okay. And I was like, all right, well, you'll have a nice night. And then she shut the door, and the minute the door closes, I hear her go, damn, that bitch was scary. And I'm sitting there like right outside. 1, I can hear you. 2, hurtful. 3, what did I do? I was just trying to make small talk like my coworker does, and that did not end up well for me. Thank you for the rose, Thorny. And I was like, what did I do? What did I do? I don't even know what I did, really. It wasn't that bad. I don't know. The thing is my makeup now is a lot more severe than what I go out in public with. So, like, I feel like that's not that bad. I don't even do anything super weird with my face when I go out. Jasmine dresses up like a fucking murderous bunny rabbit, like 2 days out of the week. I don't. And then I get called scary, and Jasmine's adorable. She can come in with like blood dripping from her mouth, and people are like, oh, Jasmine, you're so sweet. Like, I mean, I know I'm like distant, but that's only because I don't care about people. Okay, in the general sense, I care about humanity. I don't care most of the time about individual people. And my favorite kind of coworkers are the ones that don't talk a lot and just do their job and let me do my job effectively. And then we all get a paycheck and we all go home. That's my idea of the ideal coworker. I don't want to know about your life. I don't care about your kids. I don't want to know. I don't care. Unless you have a cat, don't talk to me about anything else. Unless it's job related. If you have a cat, tell me about your cat. I don't care about anything else. So, and generally, I don't really remember my coworkers' names. And I get that, but that's only because I don't care. I don't expect you to remember my name. You can call me whatever. I don't give a shit. Many people do. So, I don't know. I don't expect to be treated any differently. Maybe I've had something to eat, and I have had caffeine and water, and I have water over here and a smoothie over here as well for later. But yeah, so that happened. My attempts to go nice didn't go well, so I went back to acting like how I normally act. And that's less stressful for me. But thank you, Lady Aoife, for the postcards. I can't wait to show them that. Some Tom Letters smoothies sort of count. I don't know. If you haven't eaten, I don't think smoothies count. Unless it's an actual smoothie. Is it an actual smoothie? Or is it not? Sort of. I mean, yeah, but if you're doing it on an empty stomach, anyway, whatever, it's fine, just eat. I gotta stop vaping on camera. Anyway. That would work, I guess. I'd still recommend eating. Definitely eat, please. So we're not going to have an intermission today because we've reached the weird chapter. The weird chapter is the one that splits in a very inconvenient spot. So I'll pause for like 5 minutes for like if anybody needs to like go do something. Get your phone charger, go to the bathroom, get another smoothie, I don't know. But we're not really going to pause for an extensive period of time because it ends very suddenly. Have I eaten? Yes, I have eaten. I ate earlier. I DoorDash food to my house every Tuesday because I don't want to leave looking like this, and also I don't want to drive generally when I'm off, but I always get food DoorDashed, and I tell them to just leave it by the door because I don't want to interact with people, and also I don't want to answer the door looking like this because I don't want to answer any weird questions. I also just don't want people to look at me at all or interact with me. At the end of the reading, can I tell you what page we're on? Yeah, I can do that. That's not a problem. What? Did you say 420 smoothies? Insomniac, that's so depressing. You work with horses too, so like I feel like to work with horses you have to be in the middle of nowhere. Like, you don't have a hard copy yet. Got you. Well, I will tell you what page we're on at the end of it. I don't know if it'll correlate to whatever copy you have, but I will do so, and you can figure it out when you either get a hard copy or if you've got like a digital copy. But we've reached the wonky chapter, so we're not doing an intermission today. I just wanted to clarify that from the top. If you're in here and you're not normally in here and you don't know what's happening, sometimes I get into cosplay, and sometimes I go live, and sometimes it's on Tuesday at 8, and sometimes I read you a book, and sometimes it's about a necromancer named Johannes, and he does some shady stuff, and we're reading all about his antics. We're on the 3rd book. If you're just joining us and have no clue how you got here in the middle of the 3rd book, what is the rest of your life like? Well, you can hit the link on my YouTube and listen to the other 2. There are 2 books and a bunch of short stories on the YouTube. I am going to update the YouTube, hopefully tonight, if I can get the recordings edited from the lost episode, because I've been concentrating on doing that before uploading the ones after it. So once I get those recordings edited and finished, I will post those, and then the complete entirety of book 2 will be uploaded, and we will proceed. So that is the plan. That is what I am working on. Takes time because I am fully employed, perpetually exhausted, and sometimes depressed. So, they'll be up when they're up. I don't know what to tell you. I have a life. But don't worry, we're going to get it together. Oh. That was just another notification from something else. Okay. But yes, that is the plan. That's what I'm going to do. If you don't like it, I don't know what to tell you. Do it yourself. I'm sure most of you all don't care. But if you're new, you might care. If you're not, you're well aware of my attitude. Only sometimes. Sometimes every Tuesday at 8. But only sometimes. Sometimes once a week. Sometimes every Tuesday. Who knows? Really. Depending on your perception, today might not be Tuesday at all. Tuesdays don't even really exist. That is a man-made concept of the passage of time, which is technically immaterial. It's the highlight of your week. Awesome. I'm glad I could be there. It's kind of your Sunday. See? It's all about perception. Swift blood. What? Yeah, sometimes people say it's Toast Day. Sometimes it's Roses Wednesday. Sometimes. But we're going to read a book, and someone said that they were only going to be awake for the book. So we're going to read the book. Is everybody ready to read the book? Are you all excited about the book? Because that's what you should be here for, not me. I don't know why you're here if you're here for me. Most of the time, it's me reading a book. If you want to be read a book and fall asleep, I'm the person to do it. I love reading. I love reading you to sleep. And we're going to make some babies and animals fall asleep here very shortly. Are you all ready? Okay, short recap. 3 guys approached Johannes' house, uninvited. He was very perturbed by this, to offer an expedition to what they call the Dreamlands on behalf of the Fear Institute, whose whole goal is to wipe out the physical manifestation of fear. But you can only access that, presumably, through the collected consciousness of dreamers everywhere. So a bunch of useless poets and all of their dreams are gathered in one physical manifestation place that's like sort of immaterial, but you can definitely die there. Cabal agrees because he wants to get his hands on something called the Silver Key, which will in turn help his researches into necromancy, so he gets the key as the reward for concluding the expedition with them, which he chooses to go on. We've started the journey. We've been through the Silver Key door. We're in the Dreamlands now, so buckle up, everybody. It gets real wild. Chapter 3, in which Cabal leads an expedition beyond the wall of sleep. The mountain stood taller than any mountain had any right to stand without liquefying its own base with the sheer weight of rock upon it. Even close by that base, the 4 men looked out and stood speechless at the astonishing vista spread before them, like the world before gods. Well, 3 of them stood speechless with awe. The 4th was entirely preoccupied with beating dust from his trousers where he had stumbled on escaping the rapidly closing gateway of the Silver Key. "My God," breathed Cord, finally rediscovering speech. "It's magnificent. I never dreamed." "No, you doubtless have," said Johannes Cabal as he smacked dust from his calves. "You have forgotten it, though. That is the nature of dreams." Finally, about as satisfied as he was going to be without a valet with a clothes-brush to hand, he straightened and took in the vast world that stretched out before them. He sniffed, stuck out his jaw, and picked up his Gladstone. "If it were a view in the waking world, I would be impressed. As it is the shared fantasy of 100 billion sleepers. Impressive in its own way, but I shan't be buying any postcards." "100 billion, Mr. Cabal," said Shadrach. "You are mistaken. There are not even 2 billion in the world today, and fewer than half are sleeping at any one time." Cabal turned to him and gave him the sort of look a teacher might give a disappointing pupil before correcting him and then thrashing him. "You are correct in as far as there are no more than 2 billions in the world. You are in error if you believe that I am only considering the Earth." He paused and looked Shadrach up and down. "What in the name of Azathoth's little drummer boy are you wearing?" "What am I wearing? That's a... Good Lord!" Shadrach no longer looked nearly so much like an undertaker. Instead, his clothing fell more into the category of gorgeous. Not a description that he had ever been before attached to him in all his years. He wore a burgundy simar in the Tudor style, trimmed with fur of a curious pattern, over a doublet of cream samite, slit upper hose of the same burgundy, but with a brave crimson silk within, black lower hose double gartered in yellow, and square-toed shoes. He reached up and removed the slouching brown velvet cap from his head and looked at it in wonder. The overall effect was of a successful merchant of the 16th century, and Antonio before all that unpleasantness with Shylock. I don't understand," stammered Shadrach, his usual bloodless composure shattered. For his answer, he received an equally astonished cry from Cord, as he, too, discovered a change in his wardrobe. Cord's profoundly unenterprising twill 3-piece Trilby woolen tie had been replaced with something altogether more dashing. Again, the tone was a strange mix of very late medieval and Tudor, but the cut seemed to owe more to the cinema. A brown leather jerkin with slashed sleeves over a white doublet, black breeches and knee boots, a sword at the hip, a soft black hat with a black feather tipped in red, held in place by a small brooch of a dagger bearing a single tiny ruby. After all the crying out and holding out of hands in astonishment, Bosey's thunder had been too thoroughly stolen for him to do much more than look down at his own clothes and mumble a slightly surprised, "Oh!" For he, too, had experienced a transformation. Gone were his previous clothes, which, while conservatively stylish and expensively cut, had not made much of an impression on anyone. Now he wore a simar much like Shadrach's, but where that had complacently proclaimed wealth, this was of a profound blackness, such that the moleskin collar seemed verging on the gaudy. The whole ensemble, from shoes to the 4-sided flat hat perched on Bosey's surprised head, was black, the only touches of color being his pale face, the wide red gold chain he wore running across his shoulders and down to a medal in the middle of his chest, and the blue carbuncle ring, and the ring he wore upon the middle finger of his gloved left hand. They spent some moments gawping at themselves and one another before turning their attention to Cabal, who, they were confounded to discover, was still dressed much as he had been back in Arkham, although a scuff on his right shoe's toe cap that he had suffered on the street was now gone, and a button on his left jacket cuff, formerly depending upon a loosened thread where it had caught in a doorway, was now perfectly secure. Bosey spoke for them all when he said, "I don't don't understand, Mr. Cabal." For his part, Cabal seemed to find something secretly amusing about the whole scene, although the smirk was in a sense psychic, for his expression did not change at all. "Herr Shadrach, you remind me of a portrait by Holbein the Younger, a successful merchant. Tell me, did you ever harbor ambitions toward a mercantile life?" "No," said Shadrach immediately. Then he frowned. "Well, briefly, once long ago, when I was a boy, I visited my uncle's warehouse. He was a trader in teas and bric-a-brac from the Orient. He traveled a lot, and I wanted... My father told me not to be foolish, that there was a family business to inherit." "His business." Shadrach paused, looking at his hands. "Shadrach and Son, undertakers." He looked up at Cabal, frowning. "Is this what I could have been?" "You could have been anything, but you wanted to be a merchant, evidently. Herr Cord, I surmise, read far too many two-penny papers when he was young." Mr. Cord was not listening. He had freed the sword from its scabbard, and, while not fully drawing it, was admiring the blade. It shone white and blue as it caught the light, steel of such beautifully patterned perfection that the swordsmiths of Damascus would have torn their beards in frustration at the very sight of it. "You, however," said Cabal, turning to Bosey, "you, sir, intrigue me. What is your heartfelt boon, your great sublimated desire?" "Well," said Bosey, before becoming distracted by the gold chain. He lifted the medal and tried to read it without success. "Well, I was thinking that perhaps one day I might like to be a magistrate." Everybody looked at him. He blushed and smiled awkwardly. "It's good to have an ambition." Cabal nodded. "A chain of office, of course. Another historical trapping. The Dreamlands seem incapable of letting any lily go ungilded." Yes, said Shadrach, profoundly uninterested in Bosey's long-term ambitions to hand out small fines and morally improving lectures in court. "But what about you, Mr. Cabal? Why haven't your clothes changed?" Cord slammed the sword back into its scabbard with jaunty gusto. "Because you're already what you want to be. Eh, Cabal?" "Just so," said Cabal, and this time the specter of a smirk flitted around his mouth. He turned to look down the slope of the valley, and the smirk diminished to nothing. "Now, to business." He reached down for his bag and paused. It seemed that he had not managed the transition into the Dreamlands quite as unaltered as he had thought. The bag was open, as it should have been. He had left it open on the floor of the garret, the silver key lying within. When he had abandoned his post at the top of the stairs, he had dropped his pistol in before snatching up the bag and throwing himself into the vortex. The key, he was relieved to see, was still where he had left it. His cane still remained secured to the bag by the leather straps and ran up the sides. Of his gun, however, there was no sign. Instead, lying along the open maw of the bag like a stick in a toothless dog's mouth, there was a sword, scabbarded and attached to a belt. Cabal bit back a snarl. Of course, the Dreamlands would not tolerate something prosaically mechanical as his Webley. Here, progress was held back by a vast romantic inertia as great as that of the mountain on which they stood. One day, it might finally allow flintlocks, perhaps at some future date when the waking world was using death rays and germ bombs. Cabal took up the sword by the belt and strapped it on. It hung neatly at his left hip and added a pleasing weight to his stride that he knew a real sword would never match. Demonstrating none of Cord's bashfulness, he drew the blade in a swift motion and tested its balance. Predictably, it was perfect, although it was no sort of weapon that he had ever held or ever seen before. It was a rapier of sorts, but of a combative nature rather than for fencing. Flat-bladed with a shallow curve that swept up to a right angle, a finger's length from the sharp tip. Cabal slashed and thrust at the air for a few seconds. An interesting weapon, he concluded. At heart, a rapier, but with just enough saber in its family tree to allow the easy hacking of unfortunates when the mood took one. He returned it to its scabbard with precision and looked up to see Cord watching him with interest. "You've fenced before, Cabal?" Cabal noticed the familiarity was breeding sufficient contempt for them no longer to address him as Mr. Cabal. "I have. Have you?" "Oh, yes." Cord drew his sword, and it was different from Cabal's as a Viking 1.5-handed bastard sword is, surprisingly, from a rapier with a bit of saber on the side. "Nothing like this, I grant you." He whirled the sword in the air, and it seemed for a moment that its path was made of a gleaming arc of solid steel. He swept it back again, and then around his head, his eyes filling with undisguised joy. "It's wonderful, wonderful." Suddenly, his sword stopped in midair with a sharp cry of steel on steel. Cabal stood with his own once again drawn, halting Cord's in an exact parry. "It is a dream, Cord." He lowered and scabbarded it. "Time is pressing, and we shall have plenty of time for you to demonstrate your dazzling swordsmanship. I would remind you that we have an entire world to search, and we are by no means immortal." He took up his bag, while Cord reluctantly slid his blade into its scabbard. Cabal took out his folder of notes on the Dreamlands and found a flattish section of ground on which to unroll a map. "You have a map, Cabal?" said Shadrach. "By all, that's wonderful." "Please do not become overly excited by it, gentlemen," Cabal warned. "It was drawn from the fancies of poets and the ravings of maniacs, which is to say much the same thing, and is therefore only slightly more useful than a blank sheet of paper. Why it is always poets who are at the laudanum trough or gulping down absinthe instead of somebody useful like cartographers, I'll have no idea. In any event, we have an unreliable map, and upon it we are—" Cabal stabbed his finger down. "Here." The others crowded around and looked at the map. After a few moments of angling his head this way and that, Shadrach asked, "How can you be so sure?" Cabal took up the map, rolled it, and put it into his bag. "In all the Dreamlands, there is one particularly famous mountain. Mount Hathegkla. We are about 1 mile up it." He turned and pointed towards the cloud-wreathed summit. There was something unpleasant about the mountain's perspective, as if there were simply too much of it, and it had somehow furled itself just enough for it to be acceptable to the human psyche. Once inside the mind, however, it popped open like an umbrella with an unreliable catch, jabbing the sensitive fleshy parts with the spiky tips of its ribs and poking about with its contradimensional ferrule. Cabal, from a long mental exercise, firmly closed the umbrella again and dropped it into the elephant's foot of his superego. The others, less prepared, were struck dumb by the immensity of the prospect. Insensitive to his fellow's state, Cabal continued. 7 miles further is from the highest any human has ever climbed. Barzai the Wise was his name, which just goes to show that names don't tell you everything. For 2 miles further up is where the gods themselves sometimes sport. I have no idea what comprises sport for a god. Don't ask. In any event, they took exception to Barzai getting close enough to irk them. "What happened to him?" asked Cord, the first to discover that the best cure for an umbrella in the psyche was simply not to look. "Oh, something ghastly. It usually is with gods. They have no sense of proportion. If you are particularly interested, there is a rock at the 8-mile point that has the full story carved into it as a warning to the curious." "Why, Cord?" "Curious?" Cord was, but not enough to risk either the climb or the possibility of getting his very own memorial courtesy of the gods. Cabal smiled. Technically, he turned his back on the peak and pointed out over the land. "That river is the Okranos. If we follow it down to the sea, we shall find ourselves in the city of Loneth. Loneth is a useful sort of place for dreamers, as it is close to the enchanted wood." He pointed at a great forest visible south of the river, a good way off. "A twee name, but furiously dangerous. It is where most mortals who enter the Dreamlands through the usual route of sleep first emerge. On the other side of the river is the Dark Wood. A less twee name, but no less dangerous, just in case you were hoping for some sort of inverse relationship between names and peril here. Almost everywhere is dangerous, so you should get used to that idea as soon as possible if you wish to survive this world. Shadrach and Bosie had finally managed to tear their eyes away from the peak of Hathig Claw with the help of Cord, who had taken firm hold of their chins and steered their gaze in a safe direction by force. How will this... Loneth, Shadrach chewed on the unfamiliar word, making it sound like a small mining village in Wales. How will it help us, Mr. Cabal? We are not dreamers. Not in any sense, said Cabal, but as a result of every Tom, Dick, and Harry with a talent for the particular mode of dreaming required to travel here, Loneth is a gathering place for people whose minds are not altogether mired in the sticky romanticism of this place. In short, gentlemen, there we will find people who will give us straight answers to straight questions. Bosie shielded his eyes against the sun, an orb whose light seemed a little more golden than that which shone over the earth they had so recently left. I can't even see the coast from here. How long will this journey take? How far must we go? Time and space are not measured in the way we are used to, warned Cabal. To give you a time in hours or a distance in leagues would be useless. Cord gestured over his shoulder with a jerk of his thumb. Just a minute ago, you were telling us that this boulder commemorating Barzai the Wise, is 8 miles up the mountain, and now you're telling us that units of measurement are meaningless. Well, which is it? Ah, said Cabal sagely, before anyone could complain that did not really answer anything. He said, We have over a mile of treacherous mountainside to traverse before we reach gentler slopes, gentlemen. Perhaps we should begin. A mile! Exclaimed Cord in an attempt to make his point again, but Cabal was already stepping from the promontory that the Silver Key had dumped them on, and onto the great steep field of scree and bare rock beneath them. The most peculiar thing about the descent was how it seemed to take hours, yet when they reached the bottom of the long, ragged escarpment, the sun had barely moved a degree in the sky. Cabal muttered something about subjective objectivity, and there the matter lay. The second most peculiar thing was that while Shadrach and Bosie were neither of the utmost physicality, nor especially well dressed for shinning down the mountainside, both arrived at their destination winded but not exhausted, their clothes as pristine as when they had set off. They walked down towards the bank of the Okranos in near silence, taking in the wonders around them. At this point, they consisted largely of a ruined mansion off to the south, through which abandoned orchards, and themselves covering the area of a small town, the party made their way. At first glance, the only truly unearthly thing about the environment was the sheer scale of everything. Mount Hathig Claw was huge, the ruined mansion was huge, the orchard was huge and contained trees of ancient growth. Even the river before them was Amazonian in proportion. To Cabal's searching eye, however, there were more details that proclaimed the alien nature of the place, and the more he looked, the more subtle they became. He saw a creature that was neither a caterpillar nor butterfly, but rather a caterpillar with broad wings projecting from a chrysalis-like band about its upper third, as if a butterfly's life cycle had been cut and stitched into a single stage. He saw a rat scurry into a hole, but when it peered out again, he thought he must have been mistaken, for it had a little flat face like a capuchin monkey's. He finally realized it had the body of a rat, but forelimbs ending in ape-like phalanges, and the face of a tiny man with sideburns and a widow's peak. It glared at him with a mixture of angry hatred and curiosity until it understood they had no interest in it, at which point it grinned like a happy little man and vanished deeper into its burrow. The most subtle of the anomalous details, however, was all around them, its very ubiquity making it difficult to notice. The Dreamlands did not quite make sense to the eye. The most overt expression of this had been Mount Hathig Claw's ill-mannered refusal to be comfortably comprehensive to the viewer. It was not only big, it was the very epitome of bigness, and it wedged itself into the viewer's perception like a fat man into a small armchair. All around them now, however, the same perceptual unwillingness was always apparent. It was never quite clear just how far away the ground beneath one's feet really was. As they passed a tree, the degree by which the trunk's hidden side was exposed never quite matched up with the degree by which the trunk's side previously visible was turned away from them. Nothing worked quite as expected. Very nearly 99 in a good number of percentage places, but never quite perfectly enough to escape a keen eye and an analytical mind. Cabal had these attributes, in addition to something verging on an allergy to whimsy, so he noted these anomalies early, and he noted them often. This, then, was the stuff of dreams, and it nauseated him. Sloppy, half-baked fancies oozing from a countless multitude of sloppy, half-baked minds. He could hardly wait to conclude his business with the Fear Institute. The quicker to quit the land of the dazed. Those of an artistic bent would doubtless find much to admire in the Dreamlands' hanging gardens, their crystal fortresses, their gargantuan waterfalls, and their towers of brass and steel. To Cabal, however, they were fripperies, momentarily impressive, but ultimately risible. His interest in the place was predictably prosaic. Many necromancers had traveled to the Dreamlands before him, for a variety of reasons. To speak with gods, to seek dark knowledge, or even to grow powerful and gather wealth, respect, and a harem of houri who found names like Wesley or Cecil inexpressibly exotic. Not a few of these predecessors had come with the express intention of never returning, and so they had come as sleepers, engineering the death of their sleeping physical forms by strange rites that guaranteed their spirit lived on in the land of dreams. It was an immortality of sorts, as they would never age or die naturally, but Cabal sneered at them as failures. While real knowledge, even experimental knowledge, could be gathered in dream, it was of no consequence if it could not be communicated somehow to the waking world. With the silver key in his possession, Cabal planned to make several unannounced visits on such reprobates and gather their knowledge. By hook or by crook or by the patient application of thumbscrews, Cabal didn't mind. Once in the Dreamlands, he had all the time in the world. There was the small question of the Institute members' notable naivete. It was customary for payment to come after the service, yet here he was, with the silver key in his bag, which he wanted, and the company of 3 idiots dressed like mechanicals for a production of Henry VIII, which he didn't. It would be simplicity itself to zig when they zagged, or duck into the shadows while they were otherwise occupied, or, if all else failed, shove them off a convenient cliff. The Dreamlands certainly didn't seem to be short of dramatic landscapes, so Cabal imagined there must be any number of convenient cliffs to choose from. That he did none of these things, no matter how personally amusing he might have found them, was pragmatic. The Fear Institute expedition could and probably would run around until it was blue in the face and never discover the phobic animus, if it had the decency to exist. He truly did not care. What was important to him was that they would cover ground in doing so, establish protocols of behavior, perhaps even make reliable contacts. All of these things would be useful to Cabal when he undertook his own projects. So, while the others were under the impression that all were united in the fool's errand, Cabal knew the true function of the journey was that of reconnaissance. Plus, as he had realized earlier, there was safety in numbers, particularly when the rest of the party was made up of sacrificial victims to the higher purpose of Cabal's continued existence. All for one and one for all would be their motto, even if only Cabal knew that the former, one, would always be him, and the latter would not. "You're smiling, Mr. Cabal," said Bosie, smiling broadly himself. Cabal's own slight tightening of a few muscles was not in the same league as Bosie's open and cheerful expression, but it was at least recognizable as a cousin, a fifth cousin of a disgraced forebear. Bosie continued, "You have faith in our mission, then? You see a happy conclusion ahead?" Cabal thought of the silver key in his bag and pushed his face another few millimeters. The muscle creaked a little, but it had been some time since he had felt something akin to joy. Yes, Bosie, I think with a little caution and circumspect prudence, combined with the will to take immediate action when the need arises, this could all go very well. He looked on towards the river. Do those look like cliff tops over there? Bosie squinted. I'm not sure. Perhaps. Why do you ask? But Johannes Cabal said nothing. As it turned out, they were cliff tops, but the drop below them was ridiculous rather than vertiginous and entirely unsuited for ad hoc murder. It was little more than a bluff overlooking by a height of a few yards a sandy bend of the riverbank where perhaps once Theochronos had considered meandering before deciding it was too much effort. They stood atop the bluff in silence and admired the view, because the view was impossible not to admire. The Theochronos River, as mighty as the Amazon, as broad as the Mississippi, yet as clear as a mountain stream. Light penetrated a long way down, allowing them to see the stony riverbed from the water's edge, out until the water grew too deep and blue and shadowed. Fish, extraordinary fish that had never swum in the seas of earth, passed by or lazily beat their tails to hold position close by the rock and pebble-strewn bottom. Beside him, Cabal heard Shadrach breathe, It's beautiful, magnificent. I wonder what it's like to swim in, said Cord. Cabal had his notebook out again and was flicking through it. Apparently it is safe, at least by Dreamland standards. There may be a few things in it that will eat you, but they're not common. He became aware of Cord's expression. Really, Cord, people swim in waters populated with crocodiles, alligators, and sharks every day. Whatever happened to your defeating of fear, It is not fear, it is rational caution, said Cord, falling back upon what Cabal now recognized as the Standard Institute member's response when scared. It was not a refutation nearly so much as a mantra intended to settle the speaker's nerves. As you wish. We should keep moving. The Animus awaits us elsewhere. Unless that's it behind us. Any shame at the childishness of the trick was handsomely outweighed by the pleasure of seeing 3 grown men leap into the air, spinning about face as they did so. After the recriminations and finger-wagging, all of which Cabal ignored, were over, Bosie said, Look over there, about a mile or so downriver. Is that a quay? Cabal's binoculars had also undergone a transformation, but only as far as becoming an unforgivably ostentatious telescope, all chased brass and inlaid with semi-precious stones. Cabal held it for a moment, glaring at it with downturned lips as if it were a mortal insult. Then, without comment, he snapped it out to full length and looked through it in the direction Bosie was pointing. Yes, he said, having finally gotten the telescope focused to his satisfaction. There's a small jetty with a boat moored there. Some sort of fishing boat, I think. The mast unstepped. I can see 3 people. He snapped the telescope shut and dropped it into his bag, ignoring Shadrach's outstretched hand. Loneth is days away on foot, but perhaps only a day or so by boat. He started walking. But what if they want payment? Protested Shadrach. Cabal didn't pause, but called over his shoulder. You're a rich merchant here. You can pay. Aye, but, sir, what shall I... At which point he noticed the bulging purse hanging from his belt. He opened it, and before the astonished eyes of his colleagues discovered a multitude of thin golden coins of the Roman style. Each coin, however, was not stamped with the countenance of a Caesar, but of a beautiful youth in profile, wearing a laurel that was not a laurel. His expression was of tolerant indolence, almost sleepy, but the eyes beneath the half-closed lids were somehow ancient, knowing, and perhaps even wicked. Shadrach shuddered and dropped the coin back into his purse. He hastened with Bosie and Cord to catch up with Cabal. The fishermen, for fishermen they were taciturn, though not hostile. They listened in silence as Shadrach explained how urgently he and his colleagues needed to reach Loneth, and not bargained greatly with the subject of payment came up. They accepted a little of Shadrach's gold, although later none of the party was sure how much had actually changed hands, only that it was a little. Still in near silence, but for the occasional softly growled command from the boat's skipper, they made ready to cast off while the passengers settled in for the journey. Cabal did not like the fishermen, although he was unsure why. They were quiet and competent, qualities he usually found admirable in people, but there was something more about them that gently raised his hackles by the mildest degree. He could not define this sense, however, so he disregarded it as much as he might, which is to say he gritted his teeth and attempted to ignore the nagging sense of wrongness that badgered him at an intensity roughly equivalent to the product of a mild headache and a child with a kazoo. He sat in the bow upon a small barrel, oblivious to the conversational gambits from his fellows, and wishing bitterly that he still had his gun. It was probably nothing, he told himself. The entirety of the Dreamlands was wrong. This was just another manifestation of that. As the fishermen cast off and guided their boat into the center of the great river, Cabal tried to distract himself by watching Shadrach, Cord, and Bosey. Their earnest pointing and muttering soon bored him so much, however, that he returned his attention to the fishermen. They were swarthy men, but no more than most who worked outdoors for a living, and wore breeches, shirts of rough cambric, and scruffy turbans in pale shades of yellow and blue. Their gait was not that of sailors, and Cabal concluded that they rarely, if ever, left the river. Venturing out of the estuary and hugging the coast of Loneth was probably a major expedition for them. Yet they seemed unexcited, even blasé, to be going to Loneth, and uninterested in their passengers. Cabal shrugged inwardly. Perhaps this was normal here. Giving up on them, he turned his attention back to his colleagues for the better part of 15 seconds before giving up on them too. Perhaps, he hoped, the changing landscape might give him some distraction from the tedium of the company. Here, at least, he was not disappointed. The river and the wide valley through which it ran had a curious quality about them that, while just as mysterious as the curious quality about the fishermen, was far more pleasurable. After some careful analysis of his feelings, Cabal abruptly realized that this quality was beauty, about which he had heard so much and seen so little. On either bank, trees crowded nearly to the waterline, willows by the thousand. He had never heard of the like, never mind having ever seen such a mass of weeping boughs all together. Further into the forest, calling them woods was not merely an understatement. It was a barking lie. He could see the taller trees, oaks, elms, scatterings of evergreens, and even a few isolated palms and banyans. These were no forests that ever were, but had merely been dreamed of once, and the fruits of that strange vision had settled and grown. Cabal wondered what sort of man could have dreamed a dream of such a dream and dreamed it so strongly. He watched the trees slide by for another few minutes before concluding that this ancient dreamer, this weaver of the very fabric of the Dreamlands, was an idiot. He got it all wrong. Banyans indeed. Such a dolt. And as in contemplations of matters arboreal, Cabal sat and mused, the Dreamlands sudden. And that's the end of the chapter. And if you're wondering, did we stop in the middle of a word? Yeah, we did. That's why there's no intermission. So if you want to go get another smoothie or pee, grab a cat, I don't know, but now's the time to do it. And if you're wondering what book we're reading, it's Johannes Cabal and the Fear Institute. Yeah, it stops in the middle of a sentence, in the middle of a word, in fact. That is why there's not going to be a very long intermission. But if you want to read it and you're curious about the book, it's Johannes Cabal and the Fear Institute. It's the third book in a series of Johannes Cabal, so you can look that up on your own. Yeah, everybody, if you need to take a break, yeah, that does track. So everybody wondering why there's not going to be a large intermission, you can go to the bathroom and get a smoothie really quick. I'll give you a few minutes if you need it. If you're ready, you can tell me. But if anybody needs to go, speak now or forever hold your peace. Yeah, I can't stop for like 15 minutes and then jump right back into the middle of a word. So if we got business to attend to, let's attend to it now. Why did I get rosé? I was dumb. It was a dumb decision. I wanted to try it. I knew it was bad. I knew it was a bad idea. Hi, I'm good. How are you? What smoothie does everybody have? Yeah, we got 5 minutes. Fill the time. Only drank half your tea, and we're about halfway through reading. Perfect timing. I'm killing it. Coffee. I finished all my coffee earlier, and I was going to make more, but then I was like, or... Aw, that's so nice. Oh, I'm glad you like the reading. Yep, we do this every Tuesday at 8. If you haven't been here before and you want to join us for the remainder of the story, we just started this one. So you're actually not missing out on too much. But if you want to know what's on the other two, you can go to the YouTube channel. There's all the live recordings almost. There were a couple that got corrupted, but you can listen to the entirety of the book. Suffering with the flu. Oh my goodness. Well, get some rest. If you fall asleep during this live, no one will be offended. I will read you to sleep. Yeah, except for the fact that I never remember what my time zone is either. I think I'm in Central. It's 9 here. What time is that? Is that Central? That seems like Central, so I'm going to say Central. But I used to live in Eastern, and I flip-flopped through the two of them so much that I get the both of them confused repeatedly all the time. Good. Because I used to live in Eastern, so if I drive an hour, I'm like in Eastern, and then I'll crisscross around that boundary a lot. So then I never know what time zone I'm in. It's unfortunate. Good. Thanks looking out. 8 p.m. Central Time. I read things. All right. I think it's been enough time. Time to finish this sentence. Okay. Everybody good. Everybody go get a replacement drink if you needed one, or a cat, or a pillow. Everybody good. Look, I didn't corrupt your game day to Swift Blood. That's on you. No, I'm joking. It's probably not on you. It's probably on mechanistic failure of some kind. Yes, I am cosplaying Shinzo. Ah, yes. Babysit that cat. Babysit that cat. 2. All right. Chapter 4, in which the fauna of the Dreamlands prove unpleasant. Inlay changed. It was not a slow transformation, but rather the abrupt sense of dislocation one might suffer when feeling tired on a train journey, closing one's eyes momentarily and reopening them to discover that one is 2 stations past one's destination and can't go back until you reach Crewe. Suddenness and shock are conjoined in that moment, and that was what the 4 hopeful adventurers experienced when, abruptly, they found themselves no longer on the river, but standing in a small clearing in a wood. They reacted differently, as befitting their humors. Shadrach cried out and whirled around as if beset by invisible imps. Cord's hand fell upon the hilt of his sword, and he looked about, alert and ready. Bosey simply stood stock still, while his face warred between two expressions of astonishment, one wide-eyed and open-mouthed, and the other furrow-browed and jut-jawed. The resultant facial indecision caused his ears to flap slightly. Cabal, for his part, stood very, very still. Only his eyes moved as he gathered data in an attempt to deduce what had happened. To one side of the clearing, the tree cover seemed thinner, and the sunlight penetrated as if they were by a larger clearing, or even at the edge of the wood in which they had unexpectedly found themselves. Ignoring the others, he moved quickly that way, pushed by a barrier of bushes between the trees, and found the latter case was true. Before him was the bank of the Okranos, the river stretching away to the other heavily forested bank. There was the flow, running from right to left. Typical, he thought. We're in the dark wood. And there was the fishing boat, beating into the wind and the flow as it headed back upstream, presumably returning to the jetty at which they had first seen it. Shadrach appeared at his elbow. Hey! Hey, hello! Come back! He shouted, but the fisherman just waved and grinned. Shadrach's shoulders slumped. They're grinning at us. Is that a friendly grin or a wicked one? Cabal was otherwise preoccupied. Hello? Hello? Has anyone ever actually responded to that cry with anything but derision? The hounds like it, said Shadrach, somewhat ruffled. Cabal did not reply, but simply looked at him as a lady mayoress might look at a good-hearted but simple-minded orphan on a civic visit to a county and district simple-minded orphan facility. I'm a member. This did not seem like news to Cabal. A member of the Oaken Tree Hunt? Tally-ho, said Cabal in sepulchral tones. But to answer your question, those are wicked grins, definitely. Cord and Bosey joined them as the boat turned a bend in the river and slid out of sight, the crew still waving, still grinning, still wicked. What happened just then, Cabal? Demanded Cord. How did we end up here? I don't know, said Cabal, opening his bag. It was interesting that he still had it, he thought, that both he and Cord still had their swords, and, by the look of it, that Shadrach still had his purse full of coins. You don't know, said Cord, putting his fist on his hips, unconsciously striking a heroic pose. We hired you because you were supposed to know your way around this place. He paused at Cabal's index finger, raised in admonition. No, said Cabal. You secured my services, and do not refer to me as a hireling ever again on the basis that I have dealt with unusual circumstances of a supernatural type before and have survived with life and mind intact. As I emphasized at the time, I have no direct experience of the Dreamlands, and my knowledge is strictly secondhand. This was accepted by all of you, and it is rather too late in the proceedings to start whining about it now. Cord lifted his chin the better to glare down his nose. I was not whining about it, he said, nettled. You were whining, like a teething baby, said Cabal, watching Cord's hand drift to the hilt of his sword. Herr Cord, if you show steel, I shall kill you. Cord's hand paused. You're very confident about that, Cabal. Why should I not be? I have had practical experience of fighting with swords as distinct from fencing for sport. I am still here. You may draw your own conclusions. Gentlemen, please, it was Bosey, moving between them. We are marooned and lost in a hostile land. Now surely is not the time for diversions within our party, and united we must stand, gentlemen, for the alternative is oblivion. Cord's hand twitched, then fell back to his side. Cabal, who had been on the point of verbally agreeing with Bosey, instead kept his silence and allowed a carefully pitched, mild smirk to cross his face. Thus, he was in the happy position of allowing Cord's own pride to infer that Cabal considered him a coward, without actually having to go at all the trouble of implying it. It was the most effortless insult he had ever delivered, and its elegance charmed him. Apparently unaware of the current of animosity that still ran between Cord and Cabal, and the potential differences it augured for the future, Bosey seemed pleased by his peacekeeping efforts. "Mr. Cabal, time seemed to jump. Is this something that you have ever read of in this or any similar context?" "It is not, which is suspicious in itself. One would expect such an effect to have been mentioned at least once in the great heap of pretentious drivel that has been written about this place. Furthermore, it is not simply a skip forward in time, or, strictly speaking, the subjective perception of time that they use here instead of the real thing." Shadrach said nothing. Shadrach was nodding. "The fishermen, they seemed completely unmoved by what had happened. Indeed, they seemed party to it." "Exactly so," said Cabal, quickly regaining the expositional high ground. "It is hard to imagine a chain of events by which all four of us would meekly agree to be marooned in the woods, so one is drawn to the conclusion that this has been engineered in some way by an external agency." "To what end?" asked Shadrach. "With that sort of ability, why didn't this hypothetical agency of yours just kill us?" said Cord dismissively. "I don't believe it. Believe what you will. You are in error if you attempt to ascribe earthly motives to every mind in the Dreamlands. This could all be in the nature of a prank. Our death was not sought, only our inconvenience." "A prank?" This concept clearly did not sit well with Shadrach. If the Dreamlands were home to entities that could make time hiccup for a bit of a jape, then what were they capable of doing when they applied themselves hardly bore thinking about. "Or a distraction, or a pleasantry, or a comment, or something that cannot be interpreted by the human mind," Cabal shrugged. "Or it may just have been a fluke, a random fragment of awareness that momentarily settled upon us. Azathoth belching, the stars being not entirely wrong. Who knows? I doubt any mortal does. Whatever the intent, we must deal with the results. The very inconvenient results." He took the map from his bag and unrolled it once more. "Yes, there we are, the Darkwood. We shall have to walk to Loneth." The others gathered around, crowding into Cabal's personal space and galling him immeasurably. "Whereabouts are we in the woods?" asked Bosey. "Somewhere." "How far away is Loneth?" asked Cord. Cabal measured out the distance from roughly the middle of his long length of riverbank where the dark wood met the Ochronos to the dot labeled Loneth, between finger and thumb, then held up his hand. "About 3.5 centimeters, I'd say." He rolled up the map, put it back in its tube, and restored it to the bag. "You really must grasp the overriding principles at work in this place. Distances are measured in the difficulty of travel. Time is measured by a sense of being either quick or slow. This is a world of subjectivism, loathsome though it may be." "So, the journey to Loneth is what? Quick or slow?" Cabal gestured carelessly at the trees standing densely behind them. "Is that not already painfully apparent?" They tried to stay on the riverbank as they headed eastwards, but quickly ran into the inlet that forced them inland. It was little more than a stream, but the cut it had created was steep and sharp, and looked to be a great deal more trouble to climb out of than to fall into, so nobody argued with taking the diversion. Soon, however, the wisdom of not risking the inlet became questionable. The trees grew closer, the areas between them populated with bushes and tangles of high weed and briars. There seemed to be few paths, whether made by animals or people, and the ones that they did find wound randomly about until they petered out into the undergrowth and shadows. Cabal had anticipated the journey to Lana taking some time, but in the face of the extraordinarily hard going, he was forced to reevaluate his estimate from some time to some considerable time. It was dark in the dark wood, indicating that in the Dreamlands, at least, things functioned as advertised. It was not simply the dappled, verdant darkness of a normal wood, however, but a heavy, hungry darkness that seemed to sap the brilliance of every ray of sunlight that somehow penetrated the canopy of leaves until the light fell upon the ground, attenuated and ghostly. No insects buzzed, no animals cried. "Anybody frightened yet?" asked Cabal, suddenly, from a position of scientific curiosity. "We do not succumb to fright, Mr. Cabal," said Shadrach, not at all convincingly. "Only rational concern." The grunts of agreement from his fellows lacked conviction also. These grunts are worth mentioning, if only because if there had been a little less disconsolate grunting, they might have heard the crying a moment earlier, and subsequent events might have gone a little better for them. It was Bosey who heard it first, pausing and looking off to one side while waving a hand for silence. "Can you hear that?" he asked. The others listened intently. The woods were unnaturally quiet, but even so, the sound was distant. "Good heavens," said Shadrach finally. "It's a baby. Do you hear it?" "I hear it," said Cabal, "and it causes me rational concern. We should be going." He took a moment to gauge the direction the crying was coming from, then pointed diametrically opposite. "That way, with speed." "It could be a child, lost and frightened," said Cord, unwilling to take any advice from Cabal. "We should investigate." "Excellent idea," agreed Cabal. "You investigate just what sort of child can move through this difficult terrain with such remarkable rapidity, while the rest of us run away." It was true, where a moment before it had been necessary to demand silence, and yet still barely hear the crying, now it was easily audible and becoming louder by the second. There was also the unpleasant realization that more than one voice was crying. Cord blanched and made to run, but paused as the sound spread around them as quickly as a forest fire. They were being flanked. Oh my God! Cabal, too, had given up hope of escaping on foot. His sword was already in his hand as he scanned the trees. "You know," he said with a tone of mild distraction, "people keep saying that, but he never turns up." Cord did not reply, but his sword was drawn in a moment and he fell into a fighting stance that, to Cabal's mixed surprise and relief, looked competent. Bosey and Shadrach inspired less confidence. Having drawn the curved daggers that had come with their costumes, Cabal could not bring himself to think of their clothing as anything other than fancy dress. They stood there, eyes wide and largely ornamental daggers held as awkwardly as if they had just been drafted in from the street to murder the Duke of Clarence. Cabal expected little of them, apart from acting as distractions to whatever was coming. With luck, they would be identified as the easiest targets and attacked first, giving Cord and himself a moment's advantage. But the attack didn't come immediately. "Back to back, gentlemen," said Cabal tersely. "Cover all approaches. No, Shadrach on my left, Bosey on the right." This left Cord directly behind Cabal. It seemed better to have two weak 90-degree areas in their defense than the uninterrupted 180-degree arc that would result from Shadrach and Bosey standing together. "Come on," he heard Cord growl. "Show yourselves." Cabal didn't bother commenting on how one should be careful what one wishes for, partly because it was rather trite, but mainly because they had come on and shown themselves. He heard Shadrach gasp and Bosey sob with rational concern. The things were not children, or at least not human children. They had cherubic faces and golden curls upon their alabaster pale brows and lips as red as rose petals. Their compound eyes, however, went a lot of the way towards ruining the effect, as did the large chitinous bodies split into two tagmata in the same way as a spider, but with only 6 legs, much like an insect. The angelic little faces were mounted at the front of the cephalothorax, just as a true spider carries its seeing and biting apparatus. Unlike a true spider, however, the creatures made as ungodly a din as a kindergarten at feeding time, an unhappy simile, Cabal inwardly admitted. They crept out from between the trunks of the trees and peered down from the boughs, each at least a yard long. A swift count gave Cabal a result of 11, approximately 10 more than what he felt they could reasonably deal with. Perhaps, he thought, they would be lucky and the creatures would not be as formidable as they looked. Perhaps, and there was a degree of irrational optimism here, they would not even attack, but were just gathered around out of natural curiosity. Then one of the creatures let out a scream like burning cat and leaped in a single effortless strike at Bosie. Bosie, to his credit, saw it coming. Bosie, to his debit, reacted by moaning and fainting. The creature sailed through the space where he had been a moment before and crashed into Shadrach's back, sending him sprawling with a shout. 2 more darted out from the trees at the defenseless undertaker, but were met by cord steel. He roared and whirled, hitting the first hard across the side closest to him, severing 2 legs and a spray of brown ichor, and sending it rolling and shrieking miserably into its partner. This one scuttled quickly over the wounded monster, only to be met by Cord's second blow, delivered down and across. The creature slumped, its legs spasming madly as its baby head sailed through the clearing to strike a tree trunk with a wet thud. The creature on Shadrach's back was far too excited by having a helpless victim to hand to pay any attention to the fates of its siblings. It gripped him fiercely by the shoulders, the barbed claws along the inner edges of its forelegs stabbing him painfully through his layers of clothing and making him cry out. His mouth opened wide, and a wet proboscis, tipped with a flexing rasp, slid smoothly out and towards the base of Shadrach's skull. In a small part of a moment, the proboscis was joined by a second, but whereas the first was tubular and pulsingly organic, the second was flat and steel. The creature was clearly baffled to find the tip of Cabal's rapier driving from between its eyes, but after a moment it seemed to conclude that it had just been stabbed through the top of its skull, where the face joining the carapace and the sword tip was merely exciting. In this it was correct, and died in a state of intellectual satisfaction, a nice enough way to go. Cord stamped down on the intersection between the body segments of the creature whose legs he had cut off, and was rewarded with a satisfying squeal of pain that ended abruptly with a crunch of splittering chitin. He stepped back to his mark and fell once more into a ready position. 8 to go, he called to Cabal. Cabal grunted in reply, secretly quite relieved that he had not got as far as fighting Cord earlier. It might not have gone as well as anticipated. Not that he felt that it had extended his life by very much. Bo's and Shadrach's limited usefulness in the fight had already been expended, which left Cord and himself to deal with the remaining spider ant baby things. The creatures seemed surprised with the speed by which 3 of their number had been dispatched, and the remainder hung back, communicating with one another in a high cacophony of whines, screams, sobs, and howls in a language that was both complex and uniquely irritating. The next attack, Cabal had no doubt, would be well coordinated and tactically sophisticated. He hefted his sword and wished once again that it was still a pistol. The assault would certainly come in for the next few seconds, and when it did, Cabal and the others would die. Therefore, waiting was a poor decision. Any chance of survival depended on taking the initiative. It fell into 2 categories, attacking first or escaping. Escape was clearly hopeless. Even if they were somehow to break the cordon around them, they would still be stumbling around in this warren of a forest, an environment that the creatures knew well and were admirably adapted to. Therefore, the best chance was to combat them somehow. Sheer force of arms would probably fail, but perhaps a bluff might work. The creatures had a level of intelligence, it seemed, and a language. If a species has speech, it can be lied to. These were the Dreamlands, after all. The place was littered with ancient sorceries and all that airy-fairy nonsense, Cabal reasoned. He was a magician of sorts, and even if his magic depended more on extensive laboratory time and a lot of glasswork than on waving staffs around and calling down damnation upon his enemies, the creatures were not to know that. He racked his mind for a suitable abjuration, quickly reaching down to pull his cane from the straps on his Gladstone. He leveled it at the nearest creature. "Aye, Fatan," he began. "Aye, Fatan." Generally, being a good place to start when dealing with abominations such as these. It even impresses Shoggoths, and it takes a lot to impress a Shoggoth. He spoke the words again in the most impressive tone he could manage. Encouragingly, the creatures stopped their infernal noise and gawped at him, their cherubic faces agog like a bunch of choir boys discovered raiding the sherry in the vicarage. Choir boys with compounded eyes, shiny black carapaces, and far too many legs for polite society, it was true, but otherwise, the expression fitted. He glared steely-eyed at them while internally his mental cogs whizzed fast enough to burn oil. "Fanglui, Megoa Nafa, Cthulhu, Rile, Ulgawa, Nagfatan," he tried next. It wasn't much. Everybody in the Dreamlands surely knew that dead Cthulhu was happily dreaming in his house on Relia. It was probably sewn into innumerable samplers on innumerable parlor walls, but at least it demonstrated that Cabal was willing to call on some big names. "I, Nyarlathotep, chaos that crawls, messenger, mind and will of the gods, the haunted dark, devourer of grey lilies." The creatures twitched in a way that seemed to Cabal to indicate growing unease. They shied back a little. This was going well, he realized. Cthulhu was all very well, but Nyarlathotep was known and active. A few more threatening phrases and their morale might break altogether. "I, Nyarlathotep, see and smite my enemies, crumble them to dust, and their kin, and their homes, and their..." He dried for a moment, fumbled for a continuation, and made do with, "and their pets. Strike them down. Your humble servant implores thee. And that was all he had to say. It would be pleasant to report that Cabal's ruse worked exactly as he intended, that the creatures would decide that even if he wasn't a great sorcerer, he was convincing enough not to trifle with, and scamper off into the woods, never to threaten Cabal and his party ever again. Unhappily, only the very last part of this came true. The creature that Cabal had leveled his cane at was the first to die. It looked startled, then truly afraid. Its lips drew back in an expression of terror. The eyes grew wide, exposing even more of the vile tiny lenses of which its eyes were made. The skin grew ashen, and then the whole beast became ashes. Thin gray ashes, as if sieved from an intense fire. A rapidly advancing tide of colorless death swept from its head to its tip of its legs and abdomen, and where it passed, the creature just fell away in silent drifts and plumes. Cord and Shadrach cried out in wonder and horrified joy, and Bosie snored in innocent, deep sleep, as the gray death came to every one of the creatures, striking them down where they stood or as they tried to run from the circle of destruction. After no more than a minute, the men stood alone, and they were triumphant. "By all that's wonderful, Cabal," said Shadrach, his thin, joyless face temporarily invaded by a smile. "I thought the jig was up, but... by heavens, you showed them what for, eh? I knew he was the man for the job. Didn't I say so, Mr. Cord? Did I not say so?" Cord regarded Cabal with new respect. "That was a nice piece of work, Mr. Cabal," he said, wiping his sword clean on the swath of dust-covered grass at his feet. Cabal, however, was not exhibiting any signs of exuberant happiness. To the contrary, He was pale, and beneath his dark glasses, his eyes were as wide as the creatures at the moment they had met their doom. "Ah, God," he said in a hoarse whisper, "what have I done?" "Done, old man," said Cord. "You've saved our bacon, that's what you've done, and we're all very grateful, believe me." He went to rouse Bosey. No, you don't understand," said Cabal. He was breathing heavily. Shadrach was appalled to recognize the symptoms of fear. "What is it, Cabal? Did something happen to you when you performed that magic?" "Magic?" Cabal looked at him as if just realizing that Shadrach was speaking to him. "Magic? I performed no act of magic. It was a ruse, a ploy. I intended only to fool those creatures, to scare them into thinking I am the sort of magician who goes around casting spells." Shadrach frowned and perturbed in surprise. "But you destroyed them." "No, I did not." Cabal was recovering control of himself, but he was only hiding his fear, not dispelling it. "I called on other powers. I have done so before in similar circumstances on the basis that at least it buys me some time. The calls are hopeless, you see. They have no effect." Shadrach started to say something, but thought better of it. He looked around the trees and the scatterings of fine gray ash that lay about the place. Then he turned back to Cabal. But he did not voice the obvious question. Neither did he need to. "I called upon Nyarlathotep, the most vicious, arbitrary, and sadistic of them all. Loki, Anansi, Tezcatlipoca, Set, all faces that it has worn over the millennia, a trickster god. Do you understand? I called upon Nyarlathotep, and he heard." Shadrach tried to think of something comforting to say. As an undertaker, it was his stock in trade to be able to comfort people at difficult times, to mouth platitudes and make them sound worth something, to help people see the light of the next dawn. Now he could not think of a thing. Never in all the burials and cremations that he had planned and attended, he had ever had to commiserate with somebody who had just gained the attention, the probably baleful attention, of a real and malevolent God, a God that, when prayed to, did not depend on or even expect faith, but simply smote one's enemies. A price would surely be imposed later, at some future, unspecified Damoclean date. What can one say to somebody in such straits? Instead, he gave Cabal his most professional pat on the shoulder. It was his best pat, the one that said, "You have my most sincere, albeit non-specific sympathies." It was all he could do. Cabal's stoicism was enough to make a Spartan seem prone to the vapors. A casual observer would have seen no obvious signs of the great metaphysical disruption within his mind and spirit, but it was there nonetheless. For the first time, he truly understood what Nietzsche had meant when he had yammered about looking into the abysses. Not only had the abyss looked into him, it had noted his name, address, and shoe size. He was disturbed and distracted, and these made him voluble. "How bad can it be?" he asked rhetorically, as the subdued party made their way in what they judged was probably more or less the direction of Loneth. "I've encountered worse. I'm sure I've encountered worse. I went to hell. I'm in Satan." He didn't notice the shocked expressions on the faces of the others. Whether they were shocked at the admission or perhaps at the possibility that Cabal was losing his mind hardly mattered. Whatever the reason, their faith in him and his abilities was as shaken as he was. "Satan was nothing," Cabal muttered to himself. "I spat in his eye." There was a short pause. "Figuratively. I figuratively spat in his eye. I couldn't really spit in his eye." Another pause. "He was too tall." Mercifully for his unwilling audience, any further memoirs of supernatural entities into whose eyes he had expectorated, figuratively or otherwise, were curtailed by the discovery of a path through the wood. It was not much of a path, but it was the first time they had seen anything approaching a cleared route, and it heartened them, as surely such a thing would only exist close to the wood's edge. After a moment's quiet discussion as to whether they should follow the path this way or that, then a quiet argument, then a quiet flip of one of Shadrach's golden coins, they went this way and hoped that fortune would favor them. Fortune seemed a much better traveling companion than, say, Nyarlathotep. But even fortune may behave willfully on a slow day when she is looking for amusement. They followed the path in as much silence as they could manage, listening for the distant cry of babies. None came. There was only the oppressive quiet, punctuated frequently by their own poor efforts not to punctuate it. The path turned sharply to one side, and suddenly they found themselves in a clearing, a true clearing in the forest, not just one of the patches of slightly lower tree density that had been all of their previous experience. It was not, however, unoccupied. With the expenditure of great effort, sections of fallen trees, anything from 3 to 6 yards long, had been dragged from elsewhere and placed on their sides. Then the cores of the logs had been partially removed, apparently by many hours of gnawing. The result was crude but effective dwellings, a whole village of perhaps 50 or so. Each log was swathed with sheets of some organic substance that, at first glance, appeared to be webbing, but that, seen close to, must have been extruded as great flat sheets addled with crazed with imperfections. The explorers were just wondering what sort of creature could have made such a place when they noted evidence at their feet which answered that question. The stunted grass and weeds were dusted with thin, gray powder of a shade and consistency they had seen all too recently. "It's their village," said Cord, his sword never having left his hand since they had discovered the clearing. "Those creatures. This is theirs." "They're all dead," said Shadrach, strictly unnecessary, yet it still needed underlining. He peered inside a slightly more complex structure of 2 tree sections that had been bound together to create a small hall. Inside, football-sized egg sacs hung from the walls. Within every one, there was no movement. They dangled dry and flaccid, half filled with gray dust. "Even the unborn," he whispered. As he stepped back, his shoulder brushed the rough lintel. With a loud crack, a great section fell away, dropping to the hard-packed soil and smashing to dust. As if the sound had been all that was required to start the collapse, the roof fell in, breaking into grayness as it tumbled down. The men instinctively clustered together as the destruction spread. Hut after hut came crashing down, the sound of destruction starting harsh but ending soft. Inexpressibly disturbed, they withdrew to watch the creature's village vanish as suddenly as any baker abducted by a snark. "They're all dead," said Shadrach again, looking at Cabal with fascinated repulsion as if he were a cobra. Their kin and their homes are destroyed." Bosie was watching the last of the tree huts become nothing, very much with childish amazement. "I wonder if you got their pets, too, Mr. Cabal. If they had pets." He considered for a moment, then shook his head. "No, they look like the sort to eat anything vaguely pet-like. I don't suppose they were nearly so keen on companionship as they were on dinner." Nobody was listening to Bosie's ruminations. They were all too busy staring at Cabal, except Cabal, who was glaring back. "I say again, I am no sorcerer. The rules here, however, are apparently very different from our world in ways that we had not previously considered." "That you had not previously," began Cord, but he was cut off by the increasingly testy Cabal. "Yes, that I had not previously considered. This world is disturbingly arbitrary, or random." He looked for some term that would effectively communicate how repugnant he found it. "Whimsical, I ask you." who spent so much effort planning for contingencies, did you ever consider anything even approaching our current situation? The question was only partially rhetorical, but Cabal was glad of the silence it provoked. Into that silence crept the ever-perturbable Bosie. So, what do we do next? Shall we abandon the endeavor? Cabal shook his head, angry with himself for the weak leash on which his temper tugged eagerly. This is not a decision for now. We cannot spontaneously leave the Dreamlands whenever we want to. We must either exit via another gate opened by the silver key. Will it be necessary to destroy some other hapless soul, Mr. Cabal? Asked Shadrach coldly. Usually not, said Cabal, blithely unaware of any implied criticism. Gateways of the Silver Key rarely manifest in living creatures. Luckily, on this occasion, it chose to do so in a poet and writer, not somebody important or useful. As I was saying, that is one way of re-entering the waking world. The other is to find a rising path, which brings one up and out physically from the Dreamlands. Those are few and extraordinarily dangerous. As opposed to the nest of security and comfort in which we find ourselves now. Eh, Cabal? Said Cord. Cabal looked at him coldly. By comparison, yes, Heraccord. This is a nest of security and comfort. He looked down the path leading away from the clearing that had once held the creatures, their kin, their homes, and presumably their pets. This must lead somewhere, he said, and without waiting for agreement, he set off down it. The others quietly followed. Well, I don't know. That's the end of the chapter. Oh, that just smacked to the ground every single time that mic pack falls. Oh, probably. I don't know whether you meant me or Cabal, but I'm taking it as a compliment. I don't like puppies. I'm gonna get canceled on the internet. I can't just say out loud I don't like puppies. Man, I'm getting brave. Oh, I'm about to fling this mic pack everywhere. Okay. There we go. I'm hot. I'm on now. I like cats. I'm a cat person. The messages, I gotta catch up on all my messages. I haven't checked Discord in days, Instagram in forever. Somebody was like sending me weird messages on Instagram, so I stopped checking it. I didn't want to block them, but I was like, what are you doing? What are you doing? Are we gonna continue our we have like a weird philosophy thread going on Instagram, that I have not continued because someone started being real weird in my Instagram. So I gotta check my Instagram, and I gotta check Discord, and I gotta check, I'm losing track of stuff. After it piles up, I get overwhelmed, and then I stop. I'm like, everything's wrong, and then I stop checking everything. But yeah, I'll check my Instagram after this. Is that where you sent it, or is it a different platform this time? I'm not sure. I'm unsure. Ooh, okay. I'll check both. I gotta check both. I know I have messages on the other place that I have not checked in days. I got overwhelmed the other day, and then I was like, I'm not doing anything. And then messages piled up because I normally check it once a day, and then I didn't, and then I have left it for like a few days now because it seemed too intimidating. But yeah, how are we liking the story? Is it fun for you all? Was this fun for you? Yes, if I know they're cat videos, I'm Gucci. It's when I have to like read and think about a whole lot of stuff and I've already got so much on my mind that I'm like, I can't deal with this right now. Quit talking to me. What page did it end on? Yes, thank you for reminding me, Lady Eva. Chapter 4 ended on page 85. So, we just finished chapter 3 and 4. Yeah, on TikTok, I check my TikTok because it's all cat videos. Most of the time it's cat videos. So, that's been fun. We finished early today. I guess because we didn't do our intermission like we normally do. Because that chapter ended weird. That is the only chapter that is like that, though. We might have to reevaluate the setup for book 5 as well. Because the chapters are not chapters. They're not chapters. They're just not. They're just not chapters. So we might have to amend that. Because there's only 5 chapters in the entirety of book 5. There's no way. It's like this thick. It's like over an inch thick. And there's only 5 chapters. There's no way we're going to be able to do even one chapter the entire life. We'd be lucky to get through one. So we're going to have to reevaluate the chapter setup for book 5 too when we get there. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Yeah, we didn't do a 30-minute intermission. Normally. Yeah, it ended right in the middle of the word suddenly. And I was like, the first time I read it, I was like, did I read that wrong? And I went back and I reread it and I was like, no, it cuts off in the middle of... I thought I had a jank copy because I refused to proceed past that for several minutes while I was very confused until I read the next page. And then I was like, they just cut that sentence in half. They cut the word in half. It's not technically a cliffhanger. You know what happened in this section. I didn't want to I contemplated reading The Death of Me before the first chapter of this one because they're technically concurrent. Death of Me occurs right before this book, which makes it interesting in a linear fashion if you know what Death of Me is about and you've read it. The thing is that book 5, with the way it runs, is, it's hard to try and explain this without spoilers, but it's split into the perspective of 5 people. And they follow the timelines, which are all running concurrently next to each other, of each individual. So, it does, for the first half of some of those timelines, before they reach a concurrent point, they have to meet somewhere. So they all leave off on their own individual cliffhangers. And then at the end, you get to the point where they meet up, where they cross. So there is nothing I can do about that. But that might be a problem. For you, not for me. I know what happens. But it is the way it is laid out is, yeah, there's going to be some cliffhangers. It's going to be unavoidable. It's going to be a couple weeks of you being like, but what happened to the other character? And I'm going to be like, guys, I can't tell you that. You're just going to have to wait. Which is fine. You'll wait and you'll like it. Thank you for the finger hearts. And thank you for the roses. But it's not. It's really good. It's a really good story. I want to share it with you all. I know you'll like it when you get there. You're going to be like, fuck, why would you leave off there? Because time. Because I don't have all the time in the world, and neither do you. And people are going to miss out on some stuff because people have to go to work and do things, and they're adults. And sometimes children with schedules that they have to keep. We have to sleep. We have to eat. We have to take care of our cats. Go to work. We can't just blast through an entire book. It takes time. Takes time, you guys. Yeah, solid. I was gonna say, I was like, if I put your kids to sleep, that's because that's good. I'm doing my job. Not offended. Definitely want people to fall asleep during my live. Blast through it anyway. No, that would take days. It would take days to get through book 5. There's absolutely no way. Oh my God. That would take, the thing is, everyone would hate me because I'm going to tell you right now, if I did that, it would take several days. I would have to start, not on Tuesday, but on Sunday night and just roll through for about 2 days. Potentially 3. My whole voice would be wrecked by the end of it too. If you like the way I read now, you're not going to like it by the end of it because I'm going to be thrashed. Do I want gads? What do you mean, Dad? Yes, I want gads. We can't blast through book 5 that way. It's just not going to work. We're all going to be real dog tired by it. It seems like a good idea now, you know? And you're like, oh yeah, it's like Ego Raptor trying to play through all of Kingdom Hearts in a stream. And you can't, it seems like a good idea when you start out. Not great in practicality if like more than 12 hours in. It's not going to work. It's not going to work. It's definitely not going to work for me, the individual reading. I'm going to hurt my voice so bad. We're not doing that. I opt out. I'm not doing that. No. We're going to separate it in chunks like a civilized, decent person. I'm committing the amount of time and effort into this that I potentially can without destroying my mental health and my esophagus and my vocal cords. We're not doing that. Nah. I don't play that way. I tag one of them in. I don't even know if Nody could commit to a project like that. I don't know if Dad would. Danky's not here. Hold on. Hold on. You're gonna come with me. We're gonna ask Sarah what he wants. Hold on. We're gonna find out some stuff. Hey. Mm-hmm. Dad's going to Gad's. Cool. Do you want donuts?
Yeah.
What do you want?
Is that him on the phone?
No.
Okay.
I have 20 people from the internet in my live right now, and Dad's going to Gad's.
I like the chocolate buttermilk.
Chocolate buttermilk. Okay.
I guess is what it's called.
All right. Anything else?
Some kind of Bavarian.
Some kind of Bavarian. Very descriptive.
No such thing as a bad donut.
Oh my God. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Got it. Cool. Something Bavarian. And what was the other one? Did you say the what? What's it called?
It's like the chocolate buttermilk.
Chocolate buttermilk?
Yeah. Okay. It's not like donut shape. It's like a little loaf.
Oh, okay. whatever chocolate buttermilk comes in a loaf. Hold on. I'm going to do it while I'm up. I left it in here because I came in here in a rush. And I don't like anything jelly filled. Like if there's a raspberry or like a bear claw. Anyway. Lady Eva sent us postcards you can color.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
With tiny little markers.
He goes, they got tiny little markers. They do have tiny little markers. Thank you very much, Lady Eva. Thank you for all the roses. And thank you, Dad, for the donuts. They have tiny little markers. Oh my God. There we go. And we're back from our journey. Oh no. Oh no, I hit the side of the screen and it went off for a second. Thank you for the coffee. Probably would have been a better idea than a smoothie. Good too. Okay. I hit the side of the phone and then it opened whatever the fuck. I don't know, whatever it is on Android where it's like, would you like to activate your fucking friend or whatever that talks to you? And like, it's like some bastard cousin of Alexa and Siri. And I'm like, no, I don't want to activate you. I hate you. Get out of my face. I don't want to talk to you. I don't want my phone to talk back to me. Don't do that. Alexa and Siri already... Bixby, there we go. I forgot what it was called. I was like, it's something stupid. I accidentally hit that, and then it came up, and I was like, oh, my life disappeared. It's gone. I fucking do not like that thing. Every single time. And before Apple people come and fight me, Siri is just as bad, okay? It's not better just because they get an attitude with you. They shouldn't be talking. Shouldn't be talking. Thank you. Me either. Stupid. Bear claw. Sorry. We're still talking donut. I don't know why, Dad... There's a more effective way to take a donut order. I'm not sure what it would be at this point in time because I definitely wouldn't answer the phone since I'm online. So I guess this maybe is the most effective, but this is a weird medium. Everybody knows my donut order. It's just very confusing. I wasn't expecting donuts right now. It's like, what's going on? Yeah, best way for now, I guess, because I wouldn't really pick up or anything until after this is over. Which, are you going to Gads now? You going to Gads now or like sometime in the near... Oh, sweet. Okay, I'll have to make sure to check my... Good, because I'm actually almost out of the espresso, the Pete's. Because that shit's good with everything. Because I make it as an espresso and then I add it to stuff. So good. Okay. Surprise donuts are the best donuts. I love Gads. And we don't go that often because we just don't think about it. We don't live on that side of town anymore. So like, we don't even think about it. But... that place is rock solid. So good. But yeah, I'm almost out of the Pete's, so pretty excited. I've been adding it to Bushwhacker because Bushwhacker's so solid. I add the espresso forte to the Bushwhacker, and then oat milk and like normally like brown sugar or something like to sweeten it. Real good, solid. I just like, it has a little tab on the side of the screen. Like, you know the one. It's like a little tab. You don't even see it or notice that it's there. And it has like a dock on it. But if you sweep all the way over, it goes to Bixby. And I don't have any Baileys right now, but I'm almost sort of traumatized on Baileys because I used to work. I'm going to be a real honest person, and I'm just going to out them in 4K because I'm sick of people not like, you can't talk about companies. You know what I mean? Like, but I used to work for Verizon at a call center. It was one of the worst times of my life, like the darkest period in time. Because Verizon's trash. I don't know if you knew that, but Verizon's trash. I won't get into why, but they are. And I legitimately, that was the closest I've ever come to probably being an alcoholic. I wouldn't call myself an alcoholic. I didn't have like a dependency on it. And I very rarely would even drink it if I was at home. But when I was at work, it was the only thing that made me not get fired because I'm just a little bit happier when I have a smoothie. And the smoothie was Bailey's. I would go get coffee in the break room and I would add Bailey's to it. All day, every day. So now I almost have like, and the thing is that my cousin did the same thing. I only have like one cousin that I talk to, like a distant cousin. And he did the same thing, worked at the same place. We did the same thing for years. And he ended up getting me like a collector's glass Bailey's thing at one point with like glasses that were like glass mugs. And I was like, this is really cool. And now I can't drink Bailey's like a whole lot. It gives me like almost like flashbacks. I remember there was like, I can't remember which one it was, but there was like an iPhone release and they were like, this is gonna be big, huge, the biggest thing ever. And you gotta work overtime. And like they signed us all up for a bunch of overtime the night of one iPhone release or something. And it was overnight because it was a midnight release. So we had to be there at 11:30 and we had to stay until about 8 in the morning. It was not big. It was not big. I think I had in like 4 hours one lady call to yell at me about her bill. It was terrible. Now that sounds good. Cognac with cinnamon. I could be down for that. That sounds awesome. But part of me still loves Bailey's because I grew up with it. My grandfather was a big fan of it. My cousin and me drank it. And like, it was like a huge part of my life. And I'll have it occasionally, but I can't have a whole lot of it. And it's only like an every once in a while sort of thing. Before I'm like, what year is it? Like, it's just not my favorite thing anymore. It used to be my favorite thing. I used to love Bailey's. You have a list you could go down? Sending me a bunch of drink recipes. I love that. That sounds awesome though. I gotta try the cognac and cinnamon. We don't have cognac right now, but I might go to the liquor store tomorrow. I'm not sure. I have so much shit I wanted to do this week. Didn't do any of it. I gotta tell you, this live was the only thing I succeeded in doing. I did test cost makeup for something yesterday and hated it. Took it off. Didn't look like how I wanted it to. And so I have to go in a different direction. I got mad. I didn't take my car to where I needed it to. I gotta get the oil changed and I gotta get it looked at. And I didn't do that. I was supposed to meet somebody to go out for coffee. I didn't do that. I just drank coffee in my house. I didn't do anything I was supposed to yesterday. So I gotta do it all tomorrow. Or at least do some of it tomorrow, because I'm probably not gonna be able to do all of it tomorrow, but some of it definitely obtainable. Gotta get my car looked at. Good question, because I was essentially thinking you just sprinkle it on there, but maybe. I don't blame you. Good. Get that oil changed. Man, awesome. Good. Good on you. Everybody get your oil changed. If you haven't gotten your oil changed in a while, and you aren't sure even when you're supposed to get your oil changed, or when the last time you did get your oil changed was, go ahead and check that sticker in your car. See how many miles you're supposed to have before the estimated date. See what the estimated date was. And maybe go ahead and get that taken care of. Because I guarantee you, if you haven't gotten your oil changed in 4 months, you definitely need to. Yeah, get that oil changed. You have a fancy new car that tells you. Get that looked at. Don't just tell me that you're not going to get your oil changed because your car is making a weird noise. Get the noise looked at. I think my fuel economy's gone down. I'm unsure why, so I got to take it looked at tomorrow. I'm going to try to do that tomorrow. Good. It's okay if it's like a little overdue, but you should stay on that. It's gonna make your life a whole lot easier in the long run. Then Google it. Try Googling it. Try Googling what your car sounds like. I'm not kidding. That can sometimes help you figure out what it is. Yeah, it was like, if it's expensive, just Google it or try and Google it. Also, take note of if it starts or stops at specific times or where it appears to be coming from. If it does it while the car is running, go ahead and open the hood and try and figure out what area it's coming from so you can Google that. Well, shame on your brother-in-law. Your stuff lasts longer if you take care of it. And I don't have a lot, so I take care of my shit. Cool Quantum. It's cool. If you gotta go, thank you for joining us. We love having you here. Good. I hope you have an even better day tomorrow. I don't know what your day is going to look like, but I hope you feel better. Yeah, that's what I was saying. If your car's making a weird noise, Google it. Google it. YouTube. I guarantee you Google it, at least one YouTube video will come up with a dude that's like, today we're going to take a look at it, and it's going to have very many unnecessary race car noises or flamboyant old rock ballads or country songs at the opening of each video. It's fine. Just speed through it. Just speed through it. Bear with it. You're going to learn something. I've looked up shit before. I know how this works. Yeah. Seriously, there's no shame in it. YouTube's there for a reason. Google's there for a reason. You can just Google how to do stuff in your car. Yeah, see? I learned how to clear out the drain in my washer the other day. Thanks to some YouTube videos and the trans handyman. So you can just Google it. You can Google it and figure shit out. I guarantee you someone on the internet has done it. And then once you do it, that's the thing is, once I know how to do something, I know how to do it for life. So like, I replaced my starter one time by myself, and I'm like, I can do this in my sleep. And I guess that's just the way I work, but like, I love Mercury Stardust. Google. It works. Same. She's rock solid. I love her. So fucking good with the help. But yeah, if you don't know how to do something, you can Google it and you'll find it out. You'll figure it out. It might take a little bit of trial and error because cars inevitably is, you only see the symptoms. You have to diagnose the cause. So you'll find, like, depending on what you Google, you'll find maybe like 3 or 4 things that are like, this is what could be making this X noise or whatever. And it'll have like a list, and some of them are more likely than others, and you won't know. So you can pick which one you think would be the least expensive and like go up, or the least time consuming, and then go from there. And then try it until it stops. Just, God, that's okay. Are you outside? Where are you? Are you in your car? Where are you at? Because when you get here, I'm gonna end this live so I can have donuts. I'm not gonna lie, you guys. I want donuts. Now that I know I can have donuts, I want the donuts. So I'm gonna get off here. I'm not eating on live. That's rude. I can't be doing that. I'd say it's mostly limited to like me and Sarah, depending on what went wrong. Because it depends. If there's something I can't do, like Sarah and me will figure it out together. That's kind of our thing, which is fun. Diggy doesn't really fix anything. Dinky might break it. Not gonna lie. Alright, I should be heading out too, because Dad leaves if Dad's leaving Gad's, I have about less than 10 minutes. So I'm probably gonna head out here soon too, anyway. But I hope you learned something. I hope you enjoyed the story. I hope you get some sleep. That would be really fortunate for you. Also for me, I hope I get some sleep too. That'd be really nice. Whatever. I hope you're doing good. I hope everybody gets sleep. I hope everybody gets donuts and sleep. Everybody get donuts and sleep. I'm getting tired. Yes, I love that game. They're so cute, and you can decorate their little apartments. It's adorable. Little kittens. Sorry, I love cats. Yeah, just get here, learn about Google. That's a good, Rose can't have donuts. Nobody get Rose donuts. They might be allergic. Worried about Rose and donuts now. Rose, you just get sleep. They're gonna disagree with me on that. But yeah, Dad's leaving Gad's. I gotta go. I'm getting tired. I want donuts and sleep. Not right now. I just meant eventually get some sleep. Not like right now. Just in general. Just sleep more. But I'm gonna go get donuts. And I'm gonna maybe I should make more coffee. Of course, I love reading to you all. I love reading in general. It really thrills me that you're here. I will continue to read to you, same time, same day, sometimes on Tuesdays at 8 p.m. Central. And I'll see you guys next week. I'll also be able to get the YouTube updated, hopefully this week. But keep an eye out for that. If you want something to fall asleep to, damn. And I gotta check messages. I got you. But I will see you all next week. I hope you had a good time. Go sleep and eat donuts. Later.